Hello, everybody. Oh shit, I fucked that up, didn't I? Oh well, I guess that's staying in. Hello, Israel. Oh, I'm Yori, and today, well, I've had this topic on my mind for a little bit. God versus science, begin! Okay. As weird as that may sound, have you noticed how neither of them can seem to agree on just about anything? And it's kind of weird. I can't be the only one who thinks this, but I think it's weird that religion and science are always saying that the other is wrong without ever noticing that they kind of prove each other right. Let me explain. One thing a friend of mine actually noticed is that if you look in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, it lists which animals get created first and in what order. Weirdly enough, if you look at it, it follows the path of evolution, which is the weirdest fucking thing when you consider the biggest people to deny the fact that evolution exists are Christians. Think about that, for example. Oh, for instance, because, when you think about it, nobody says that a day for God is a day for humans. Absolutely not. Oh my lord, no. So, it makes perfect sense if God spending 7 days and 7 nights to create the world didn't really happen in a human's version of 7 days and 7 nights. Because even in other books in the Bible, God's like, 1,000 years for me is not 1,000 years for you. So it explicitly says right there that that some timelines in the Bible, when said specifically by God, may not be accurate to human timekeeping. So when you take that into consideration, if God sat there and used the process of evolution to do his creations, then evolution is kind of proving Christianity right in that sense, which is just weird to me because Christians are the ones the most against it, and it's just like, what? Yeah, religion and science don't get along for the most part, but it's weird to me that they don't. Because science constantly says you can't rule something out unless you prove it to be false or true. But the thing is that when it comes to, God, that's not possible. The way I look at it is we're confined to what we can perceive. So, if we can't perceive God with our physical senses, or within the folds of the dimensions that we're in, it makes perfect sense for us to not be able to prove or disprove that God exists. What I mean by that is, well, have any of you heard the ant analogy about an ant not being able to understand what we are because we're so far beyond their scope of comparison or anything they know how to comprehend that they literally could not understand the giant thing in front of them? I feel like it'd be a lot like that, because when you think about it, really think about it, which I had a good long while to do at one point. When you think about it, human perception is only a small scope of what the grasp of reality actually could be. There are creatures that see so many more colors on the light spectrum than we do that it honestly pales, that we just pale in comparison. We just cannot even comprehend the colors they're seeing. Even ultraviolet and infrared light is a thing that we could not conceive of until we developed the technology to enable us to see it. Which means that a lot of these things that we can't prove could just be something we haven't developed the technology to look at yet or perceive. Like, when you actually think about that, that just kind of makes you scared. Think about it like this. We're confined to only the dimensions that we exist within. But if something existed on a dimension above us, what all can they see that we can't? That's actually insane to think about. And the thing is that one of the things that holds reality together is time and space. In order to exist in a different space, you have to, in a sense, defy time through movement. But even though you defy and warp time through gravity and movement, you never exist outside of it. It's part of why time travel is theoretically not possible. Because if you were to move faster than the constraints of time, there's no real evidence that you wouldn't just cease to exist. So, theoretically, if we are constrained to the confines of time, a being that just isn't within our capability to understand. And what I mean by that is, if God created literally everything, the blueprint of the universe, which, if you follow Christian theology, you would think that would be your assumption. Why religious people have this tendency to dismiss science, I don't know. Because, truthfully, science, in a sense, would just be the blueprints God created for the universe to run by, like the laws of physics and gravity and time and such. Just because we're mapping out what the rules are does not defy God in any sense. I mean, if we try to screw with nature too much, bad shit's gonna happen, because God created things in a balance, and as history has shown us many times over, fucking with the balance naturally created by God tends to end badly. If anybody's read any sort of historical documentation on defying nature or any such thing, you know where the history comes from. And even just from a biblical perspective, defying God never ends well, and nature runs by God's will, but also we're a part of nature, so to a certain extent, and we follow God's will, but that's also sort of a gray area because of the whole free will thing. It gets real complicated, doesn't it? But what I'm getting at is there's no real reason to think that science is denying God. And that's the thing that makes me so weirded out by the fact that these two never seem to agree. They can't seem to agree on anything. But when you look at the bare basic facts, and let me be clear here, there's conflicting things in the Bible. There's always been conflicting things in the Bible. And I think that's more due to the flaws of human nature and alteration and translation errors, because let's be fair here, the human race ain't perfect. But reality, I don't see any of the basic concepts of God being disproven by science and vice versa. Like, scientists are like, well, we can't prove God is there. Yeah, no shit. We're the ant and he's the giant. That ain't gonna happen in a long ass time. If we ever get science to prove God exists, it's because God let us. It's because God dimmed himself down enough for us mortal beings to understand. Because for all the stuff that we found out through science, there is an enormous amount that we don't understand yet. And for all of this to be his creation, if you think about it, it just sort of blows your mind. Because in order for something to have created these things, they have to exist outside of it. They can't be part of it. Which, when you try and visualize it, sometimes it gets weird because you're like, are we just in a bubble that he's holding in the palm of his hand? It's kind of crazy. Another way I like to look at it is the theory of matter. Nothing is ever created or destroyed, simply transformed. And if God created everything, what did he create it from? In the theology, there was God, and then there was everything. And if nothing can be created from nothing, that would be a little of a paradox. Like, if you're thinking about it from a scientific standpoint. So, a lot like we imagine the Big Bang created everything. If God was the source of that bang, and his decision to create was this bang, it stands to reason that God created everything out of the only thing that existed, himself. And in that case, literally everything becomes something he created in his own image. His image of what he wanted it to be, what he wanted it to look like. If God crafted the heavens out of his own body, it would make entirely too much sense for these pieces to never be able to be created or destroyed, because it's a part of himself that he decided to craft into something. And it also makes sense why they cannot be created or destroyed, because, well, that's God, and God is indestructible. If you believe in him, at least. Which just honestly proves the point even further. Think of it this way. If all matter is like, well, an atom or a cell to God, each individual little particle is a piece of God. And everything created within him is a part of him, which means you or I are a lot more like an organelle in a cell, or a part of an atom in a molecule. Which means we have no hope of ever completely understanding God in his entirety, because it's just so far beyond our pay grade. I mean, are we going to expect our mitochondria to understand the body it's powering the cells of? Like, no. That's just an ingraspable concept. And no matter how much that mitochondria might develop the ability to sense its surroundings, there's always going to be a bigger picture. There's always going to be more that they don't understand. Which is probably why humans are so desperate to understand it. Because the more we know, the more we realize we don't know, and we keep looking. Because we lost our deep, innate understanding that other animals seem to have. Think about it like this. Animals have this innate sense that humans just don't. Animals know when a storm is coming. Animals know when fire has broken out. You don't see animals getting caught up in storms or fires unless it was either insanely quick, drastic, to the point where there was just no escape, or the animal was injured or too young to move the way it needed to escape. That's why you don't hear about mass animal graves in forest fires, because most of them escaped. But a human has to see it, has to hear it, has to smell it. But an animal, it knows. It just knows ahead of time. Which means there's an innate sense of understanding in nature that we just simply lack. And I think our innate desire to gain knowledge is part of the reason that is lost. The reason I think so is because we're the only species that lacks this innate sense that we can tell, and we're the ones that are always driven to know more. We're driven to explore and push boundaries and gain knowledge in a sense that I don't think we've ever been able to see in another animal. Like, yes, animals can learn. Animals do learn. But no other animal sits there and tries to understand why a thing happens the way we do. It's kind of crazy. And when you sit there and think, you start to realize how much of the Bible aligns with the science behind all of this. Because God says that we're special, and the whole reason that we were kicked out of heaven was because we ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. If we're instinctually driven to find knowledge, even to our own detriment, that might explain why we no longer truly understand and everything the way we should have. Because even in the Bible, it mentions we lost a connection to God, but we gained knowledge. It's truly a bit of a mindfuck. And when you think about it, it kind of relates back to what I told you in the last video with knowledge and understanding being two completely different things. But it also stands to reason that having both would have been really special. But I don't think we're ready for that. Anyway, I kind of blew someone's mind once with the whole God being matter. The way I actually told them at the time was, the universe is constantly expanding, right? And everybody says, oh, the heat depth of the universe when everything's expanded and all the energy is spent up. Do you want to know what else expands? The rib cage when we breathe. What if this whole expansion of the universe is one deep breath in from God, and then when the heat depth of the universe happens, he starts letting the air out, and it all draws back to where it began. And it happens all over again with the next breath. Is that kind of neat to think about? I sure thought so when I thought of it. But yeah, I blew the dude's mind. It was awesome. But yeah, just the more I learn about things, the more it seems to kind of line up, and everybody's just too busy arguing to realize. I wonder if anybody's ever going to notice, besides the one talking to you. I encourage you to look stuff up. Go right ahead. And I have a friend who researches theology in her spare time because, honestly, I don't know why. She just does it. I think she finds it fun. I wouldn't really know. Honestly, I have too much religious trauma to sit there and fine-tooth comb the Bible. Personally, I rely on a gut instinct to decide whether or not I believe a thing. Mostly because, well, I know people. People lie and deceive and change recorded history and facts to suit whatever the fuck they need at the time. And I have zero doubts that the Bible or even science is exempt from this. Can somebody say funded research with a bias? But yeah, I guess that's all from me this week. Sorry about the lapse in episodes. We found an injured stray kitten. And at that age, they need constant supervision. I was halfway afraid she'd hang herself in the yarn bag. But she seems to be doing okay now. Alright, I'll talk to you guys next time. Yori signing out.